All right, so you're welcome again to the Christian Apologetics, anchored by the Jesus Things of the Shining Light Family Church in Northern Nigeria. Guys, come interdenominational, non-denominational apologetic hangout. So we're not promoting any church here. It's just somebody has to anchor it, basically. And usually when we start every meeting, we like to explain why we do this. Why apologetics? It's because many people, many Christians, have an idea about the question, what we believe. So we can answer what we believe. We believe Jesus is the Son of God. We believe there's heaven and hell. We believe there's something called a sin. We believe there's remission of sin. We believe in sanctification. We believe in purification. We believe in all of those things. We believe in the Holy Spirit. We believe in baptism, by immersion, by sprinkling, whatever we want to explain it. Most times, people have an idea or think they have an idea about what we believe question. The problem most times is that there are so many unanswered whys. Why do we believe what we believe? And it causes a loss of identity. People begin to have shape-shifting identities. And finally, a lack of identity, simply because we don't even understand why we believe what we believe. And a simple question I used to, it says, my dad's middle name is Abdullahi. He was a Muslim. His dad died a Muslim. His mom, by God's grace, gave her life to Christ. She passed on about 5 years ago. So if I, or if you, your name is Usman, and you were born somewhere in Kandahar, in the middle of Afghanistan, what will make you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Why do Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Why do we believe that there's a life after death? So most times we know what we believe, we don't know why. And sometimes, even when it feels like we know why, we run into a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is we don't know how we arrived at that answer. So how did we arrive at the fact that Jesus is the Son of God? How did we arrive in the fact that Christianity is the only way to the Father? How did we arrive at the 66 books of the Bible? How did we arrive at, certain Christian doctrines? Now, because we don't know these problems, especially for younger persons, people, not just younger in terms of age, it could be younger also in terms of Christian maturity, we get into a world that is fastly losing touch with religion. I'm using the word religion here because just as the Christian folks are losing their younger people to the delusion of God doesn't exist or our religion is just mumbo jumbo, it's also happening in other religions, right? Perhaps in a month's time, when we start looking at Christianity, the Christian doctrine versus the Islamic doctrine, I'll share a video with you guys where even the Malams and everybody, they are willing, because the statistics is that, especially for those in the Western world, the statistics is that about 15% of Muslim youths are backing out from Islam. You would think we should be happy because if they are backing out, they are coming to Christianity. The answer is no. Is that there is this apathy for religion as a whole, and it's catching up with Christianity very, very, very fast. The error is to assume that this is true only for young people in the Western world, but I say no. Even in Africa, even in Nigeria, I dare say, many people are losing touch with what Christianity really is. Many young people still coming to church will stop going to church once they go for service. Even in school, they don't go to church. They don't relate to any religion. They come back home and they play the saints. Once they get their freedom, they will hands off. You only need to go to the comment sections on social media and see what is happening. So it is an avalanche and something that we need to work on. My diagnosis is that we don't have the how, and we don't know the whys of what we believe. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, the Bible talking says, but sanctify the Lord in your hearts and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. But we must be ready to give a defense. We must be ready to give a defense. We must be able to be ready to say, this is what I believe. This is why I believe what I believe. And when they bring their objections and their criticisms, we can go into the Bible and break it. Recently, I was discussing with somebody, and the person was trying that Muhammad was going to come, that he's going to send a comforter, and that Muhammad was a comforter. So I took the person through the scriptures. We looked at that same passage, what Jesus Christ said, I'm going to send the comforter. He's going to remind you of all the things I've told you. He's going to be with you, but the world will not know him because they cannot see him. Only that statement just crumbled the whole argument. Muhammad was seen, and Muhammad is not inside of me. Then definitely that's not what Jesus Christ promised. You know, but you see it on social media, they use it a lot, and Christians, young Christians, can't even say anything about it because we don't know, we are not prepared to make a defense. And when you're not prepared to make a defense, and your foundation is hammered here and there, everywhere, there's tendency you begin to lose your identity and fall away. Today, we'll be looking at 5 apologetic questions every Christian should learn to answer. 5 apologetic questions every Christian should learn to answer, not for the purpose of debate, but we just need to know them, right? And the 5 questions are, have the New Testament documents been corrupted? Is there any evidence that the resurrection of Jesus Christ actually happened? Is there really any evidence? Has science disproven God? Is there any evidence outside the Bible that Jesus actually existed? Is there really any evidence? And does the Bible condone slavery? Right? In 2 weeks' time, when we meet again, we will be looking at Christianity, the white man's religion. It is another angle to the criticism of Christianity, especially among the Black community. And Africa is basically one of them. Nigeria's chief. People are beginning to say on social media now that we should leave this white man religion and go back to our own religion. And they begin to tell you how going to a herbalist brings faster solution than the Christian religion. They've even brought it into politics and say, look, bring some of these charms and tell our politicians to swear by them if they've stolen money. That will get more reactions than if we are just holding the Bible or perhaps the Quran, as the case may be, and telling them to swear on it. People are beginning to believe that the Christianity is a white man religion. That will be what we'll be looking at in 2 weeks' time. Is Christianity actually the white man's religion? But for today, we'll proceed with our topic. Point number 1, have the New Testament documents been corrupted? And the simple answer is no. They haven't been corrupted. How do we know that we even have accurate copy of the, how do we know that we have accurate copy of the original New Testament? Many reasons, but again, because of time, we just take a few of them. The Bible, and especially the New Testament, is one document that has the most early manuscript that we can talk of when compared to many other documents in the world. It has earlier manuscripts, more accurately copied manuscripts, and more abundantly supported manuscripts. Remember that the Bible was not written as a whole book. They were written as letters or as sub-documents, like Luke writing, telling people about what happened in the book of Luke and also in Acts, or Paul writing to the Christians in Rome or the Christians in Corinth. They were documents. And as Paul wrote them, somebody will hear that, okay, Paul has written something, and then the person goes on to rewrite it, share it to other Christians around. And so they were manuscripts, plenty manuscripts, right? More manuscripts and more earlier manuscripts than any classical work of literature. Any classical work of literature, you know that people quote and people don't doubt, the New Testament has more manuscripts and more earlier manuscripts than any classical work of literature in the world right now, right? And we know that we have the original New Testament not diluted because of a term called textual criticism. There's a term called textual criticism. And I just gave an example there on the screen. So let's say the original manuscript, the middle one, for one reason or the other has been destroyed or cannot be found, is missing, or something, life has happened to it, time has played on it and is degraded over time. Because we have plenty early manuscripts and lots of manuscripts, we can reconstruct what was in the original manuscript. So when people say that we have so many manuscripts and therefore how can we say, and there are some slight differences in them, so how can we say, how do we know which one is correct? The logical argument is that the fact that there are many manuscripts is what makes it difficult for somebody to dilute and falsify the New Testament. Because your own manuscripts are not so far away from what the general manuscripts have. I mean, you can't just come one day and say Jesus is a girl. Right? I mean, it's not there. It's all other manuscripts copied all around. It's saying Jesus is a boy. After the time he was born, you can't come up with a manuscript from somewhere and just say he's a girl. It's not possible. So the fact that there are several manuscripts actually give credence, and it's not a point against the New Testament. So let's say we have 4 copies, and copy 1 said God is, then maybe there's a hole in the manuscript. Remember, some of these manuscripts look like the background picture you can see on your screen. Maybe some parts are eaten off like that, right? So let's say the first manuscript we have, God is then an O there or something, we're not too sure. Then you have UST and the justifier of the one who has faith in Christ. The second manuscript has God is J, then you are not too sure what is there, then you have ST and the remaining. And it runs like that up to copy 4. I am sure that you and I can reconstruct that text in a critical way by looking at the 4 manuscripts and therefore conclude that the original manuscript had the sentence, God is just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Now, this might look like a very simple exercise, but the truth is that the New Testament have far fewer variations than this example. So the theory people throw out that we don't have the original New Testament or that the New Testament Bible has been corrupted is false. It is more difficult to even corrupt the New Testament now with technology, and some of these loaded as ever been. So you and I have the original statements by Paul, original statements by Luke, by Mark, by Peter. We have the original one. What we are reading in our churches are the original words. because textual criticism has helped us to preserve. God in his wisdom allowed that process to happen. And therefore, anybody who tells you that the New Testament has been corrupted is lying. Yes, there could be some missing verses. If you read some New Testament, for example, that incident when Jesus Christ came down from the mountain, and there was a young boy who was plagued, and the disciples couldn't heal the child. And then Jesus did. And the response was that things like this do not come except by prayer, right? Some Bible omit and fasting, and some just put prayer, right? So we have some of those minute variations, but they do not in any way interfere with the core doctrines of Christianity. They do not in any way interfere with the core doctrines of Christianity. And we're taking time to spend some time on the New Testament, because of course we're New Testament Christian. But if I take us back to the Old Testament, and we don't have the time tonight, there could be differences in measurement. 562,000 soldiers, then another place would say 564,000 soldiers. The number of soldiers, the difference doesn't change the fact that the Israelis went to war and they won that battle, right? So it doesn't affect the core of the doctrine of Christianity, right? So when you put early manuscripts plus lots of manuscripts plus textual criticism together, and what you have is reconstructed words with high accuracy, and that is the New Testament you and I have. To know more about how to defend your faith with people you're trying to preach to who have been indoctrinated that the New Testament has been corrupted, I would suggest you read the book Myths and Mistakes in the New Testament, Textual Criticism, by Elijah Hexin and Peter Gorey. You can find it online, and it do us a lot of good. But we must get to the point where we see the need to talk to other people to give their life to Christ. And if this is going to be a hindrance, we should be able to answer them. The common Christian answer, like the God is given by inspiration, most people won't take that again, right? Most people who want to get facts, and that's why I'm taking time to explain the facts to you. Point number 2, is there any evidence that the resurrection of Jesus actually happened? And the answer is yes. There's an esteemed historian and New Testament scholar, Gary Harman, collected over 1,400 of the most critical scholarly works written between 1975 and 2003 about the resurrection of Jesus. These works range from the ultra-liberal to the far-right conservative. He observed that virtually every scholar agreed on several points surrounding the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I'll be taking us through 4 of them. 4 out of the several points. Number 1 is that Jesus died by Roman crucifixion. So even one of Bert Ehrman, which is one of the present-day critics of the New Testament and the doctrines of the New Testament, or the veracity or validity of the New Testament, as the case may be, or perhaps permit me to say the authenticity of the New Testament, agrees, in spite of all his, kick back against the New Testament, that Jesus actually died by a Roman crucifixion. No scholar, what is sought, disagrees with the fact that Jesus died by Roman crucifixion. Nobody should debate that with you, or will I say nobody should debate that? Nobody should doubt that if they know their sources properly. Number 2, most of these scholars out of the 1400 also agreed that Jesus' disciples believed he rose from the dead and that he appeared to them to the point that they were willing to suffer and die for those beliefs. You would say some Muslims suffer and die for their belief in Allah. They can put on suicide vests and explode themselves. But there's a big difference between what they are doing, the type of martyrdom they expose themselves to, and the martyrdom of the disciples who were with Jesus Christ. Somebody may give up their life for something they think is the truth. Something they've been told is the truth. People could go ahead and give their life for that. But it's very, very difficult for people to give up their life for something they know is not the truth. The disciples were the first generation Christians. If it was true that Jesus didn't resurrect, Jesus didn't die and then resurrected, at least one of them, if not one, maybe their friends and their families would have recanted. All saw it. Even Jesus Christ was so careful to expose himself to Thomas. Came back several times until Thomas saw him and placed his hands in his palm and the side of where he was pierced. And they all gave their life and died. In fact, Bro John, in the book of 1 John, he said, this Jesus Christ we are talking to you, we've seen him with our eyes, we've touched him, we've eaten with him. I mean, we are telling you what we know. If you feel you want to hush us, I mean, you can do whatever you want to do. But look, we are willing to give our life because we know what we saw. So Jesus' disciples believe he rose from the dead and that he appeared to them. So there's a common, well, not too common, there is a school of thought that believe that Jesus' disciples, they were hypnotized or something. How can that happen? The Bible said that he appeared to over 500 people. What sort of hypnosis is that? Right? So point number 3, that the church persecutor, Paul, suddenly, and that's the word I want us to underline there, suddenly became a Christian after having an experience that he believed was the risen Jesus. So all of this, remember, we're making reference to 1,400 critical scholarly works, right? Ranging from the ultra-liberal to the far-right conservative. Many were not written by Christians. Many were written by pure historians and philosophers. And they all came to, well, most of them came to this conclusion that Paul, who was a persecutor of the church, suddenly became a Christian after he had an experience that he believed was the risen Jesus. I must say here that Paul, or Saul as the case may be, was not just an average person. He was very erudite. He was very educated. And he wasn't somebody to be pushed aside easily. Right? So if Paul said he had an encounter and he made a U-turn, a total U-turn, he was out to crucify, out to arrest, out to destroy, and all of a sudden, he made a U-turn. Paul must have had an encounter with somebody. Point number 4, the brother of Jesus. And in historical documents, he was famously skeptical about Jesus. His name is James. He too had that sudden conversion after he believed that he had seen the risen Jesus. The Bible didn't tell us so much about the brother James, but we got to know about it from the Jewish historian Josephus. Josephus was the Jewish historian, and he told us a lot about the church and what happened after Jesus. Of course, if you've read some hymns, you hear how Thomas came all the way to in Africa, and how several of the disciples died, and Peter upside down, some of those things. And some of those details were gotten from contemporary writings that existed around the time that the first generation Christians were alive, right? So aside the Bible, there were writings of other people, journals of other people, sayings of other people that got into either repeated mouth to mouth.
So I will know how that to come in.
Writing down, just a moment. Okay. So the brother of Jesus, his name is James. He didn't believe that his brother is God. I mean, very few people don't have the opportunity to have a brother. I have a brother, and I can tell you for free, he's not God. If you have a brother here, just close your eyes and picture him for a moment. And would you believe that your brother is God? I mean, it's almost impossible. Several encounters with Jesus growing up, and he never for one time believed that Jesus is the Son of God. But he had a sudden conversion after he believed that he had seen the risen Jesus. Of course, he knew Jesus died. James had that sudden conversion. He went around preaching. The same church leaders that crucified Jesus were the same ones that threw James off the cliff of the mountain top, and they stoned him to death. James died telling people that my blood brother, quote and unquote, is the Son of God. 1,400 documents, and majority agree on these 4 points: James's conversion and crucifixion. Habermas also surmised that about 75% of the scholars also agree that Jesus' tomb was found empty. Of course, as early as biblical times, and it was recorded in the epistles, the Jewish leaders had tried to paint a scenario that Jesus' disciples were the ones that stole his body out of the tomb. But the best explanation for this minimal fact is that Jesus was in fact resurrected from the dead, and that he actually died. So is there any evidence that the resurrection of Jesus Christ actually happened? The answer is yes. And like Frank Turek would say, I have a big problem. If somebody predicts his death correctly and his resurrection, and he actually dies and resurrects, I will believe whatever that person says. Jesus did exactly that. Going to the internet, mixing with people from the Western world who are beginning to lose their touch with religion, not just Christianity, but religion as a whole, they will make you feel like you are stupid believing in Jesus. Now, how dare you believe in one man in the sky? And they make religion and Christianity, to be precise, look stupid. They don't know the facts. We shouldn't be the one bulging. They should be the one bending their knees to the knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. To know more about this question, I want you to perhaps take time to read the book, The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus Christ by Gary H. Habermas and Michael Licona. You can also find this on the internet. Question number 3. Has science disproved God? If you've been following the Apologetics for a while, we took about 3 months to delve deep into this topic when we're discussing, do you have enough faith to be an atheist? Science has not disproved God. And in fact, science cannot disprove God, in spite of what people try to paint. In fact, it is even wrong to try to pitch science against religion. I dare say that there is a new movement stronger than Islam, and it's taking its root in the Western world, spreading very, very fast into Africa and even part of Asia. And it is a movement of people who believe in the religion of science. And I'm using the word religion to replace philosophy. By the way, Christianity is a philosophy. All religions are philosophy. Philosophy is a way of thinking, right? You think in a particular way, that is your philosophy. So in that context, some people believe in science and that they pitch it against religion. That itself is wrong. Why? The statement, has science disproved God, is logically wrong. Why? Science, by definition, is the study of a materialistic world, and God is not materialistic. The statement is thus a philosophical statement and can't be proven in a lab. The fact that God exists cannot be proven in a lab. You can only prove materialistic things in the lab, and God is not materialistic. So there's no way that science can disprove God. In fact, we took time, was it last year? Last year when we were doing that study, and we're able to prove that God exists without even opening our Bible. What we did was that we looked at almost over 34 scientific data points that prove to us that God exists. So rather than even proving that God doesn't exist, or Mr. Jaibos, please mute your mic. All right. So thank you so much. So rather than disproving, science actually proves that God exists. Science makes us, it was through science we got to know, the act of science, looking at the materialistic thing, that we got to know that there is actually a beginning. If you put the Bible aside, science tells us that there is a beginning. The Big Bang, boom, beginning. And science made us understand second law of thermodynamics and all of that, entropy and all of that makes us understand that matter, time, all happened at the same time. At the same time. They all happen at the same time, right? From that singularity. And even up to now, the outer space is expanding. The universe is expanding. We took time, again, that's not the essence of today's class, but we looked at 34 of those theories and of those laws, and they all pointed to the fact that there has to be a beginning. And we concluded that if there is a beginning, there has to be a beginner. If there is nothing, there can be something. If there is a beginning in the Big Bang, there has to be a beginner. In fact, the Bible made us to understand that that scientific point, that everything started at the same time, can be derived from the Bible. The Bible simply said, in the beginning, God, who is the beginner, created the heavens and the earth, right? Again, we went ahead and looked at it. In the beginning simply signifies time. God created the heavens, space, and the earth matter. Exactly what science is trying to prove too. In fact, we went ahead and looked at it and we saw that God created trinities of Trinity. Because space, X, Y, Z, time, past, present, future, matter, liquid, gas, solid. And the triune God created trinities of trinities all at the same time. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we know that there's going to be an end. Science also explains that. The world is cooling down, our sun is burning out. Of course, it will happen in a lifetime. So there are so many things, the radio waves and all of that, right? We looked at all of that. So it is even wrong to try to say, can science disprove or can science, quote unquote, prove God? Because science by definition is materialistic. God isn't, but science can point us to God. Where there is problem is when religious people, and I'm using the word very, very loosely, attributes generally to God certain things because of ignorance. And then when science unravels it, and science gets stuck because science doesn't know everything, and science never assumes it knows everything. That is why it continues to find solution, right? So if science is stuck, religious people quickly say God. Then when science unravels it and gets stuck at the next point, religious people will go to that next point now and say God. So they usually call us the gods, our God, quote and unquote, the God of the gaps. Yeah, science can disprove the God of the gaps, but science cannot disprove the God of the Bible. The Bible told us from the beginning, God created everything. If you want to understand more about this particular point, whether science has disproven God or disproved God or not, I'll ask you to look at this book, God's Undertaker, Has Science Buried God? Is by the popular Professor John C. Lennox. It will blow your mind and wow you on this topic. So let's keep moving on. The next question is there any evidence outside the Bible that Jesus actually existed? Is there any evidence outside the Bible that Jesus existed? I know we've talked a little on this when we're taking our second point, if Jesus actually resurrected from the dead. And the answer is yes, plenty. On the internet, it is get thrown at us that Jesus does not exist. It's a myth. What's the difference between Jesus Christ and Horus and some of those Greek gods? Like they try to paint all of that. But there are 10 non-Christian sources that mention Jesus within 150 years of his life. He's mentioned by Josephus. I told us he's the Greek, the Jewish historian, Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, Plagan, Phallos, all of those people, even the Jewish Talmud mention Jesus, and these are not biblical sources. This does not include several eyewitnesses and historians who wrote about him. Jesus was a real person. Jesus is not Zeus. Jesus is not some of those Greek gods that you can actually call them myth. Jesus was a real person, flesh and blood. He ate, he slept, he was tired, and the Bible told us that he did these things. He actually existed. He said some things about himself, they came to pass. He was killed. He was buried. They rolled a stone across the tomb. He rose up. And several people saw him ascend into heaven. He is real, more real. He's as real as you and I, actually. So to know more about all we have talked about today, I will ask us to read this book by Frank Turek and Norman Geisler. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. It looks at all of the things we discussed, including the scientific pointers to the existence of God and all of that. I want us to take a look at them and clear our minds. Let no one deceive us. Even on Facebook, Instagram, you go, people are talking about God not existing, or if God is getting out of vogue. That's not true, right? So you notice we have one more point. I will jump that. And introduce us to the next topic we'll be having in 2 weeks' time. Is Christianity, the white man religion, right? We will touch on the last point. We discuss 5 points. Does the Bible condone slavery? And the reason why we need to discuss this is because, again, it has been another topic rising up on the internet that Christians keep changing the goalposts. At one point in time, the British, the Argentines, the French, and the like went on slavery rampage, conquering lands and taking people into slavery. And right now we have the Black Lives Matters and there's so many other things coming up, and people seem to be changing up their mind and saying that, okay, this is not right. But they say, well, but these guys were the guys who brought Christianity to you. So if they were wrong about this, what else could they be wrong about? We'll be looking at it from the correct lens 2 weeks time. Christianity, the white man's religion. I want to appreciate every one of us who have taken our time to come. I'll give room for some questions and comments before we call it a wrap in another 10 minutes. Thank you so much. So please, if you have questions, comments, just raise up your digital hands and we'll have you answer them. But I noticed many of us came late, so I'll quickly go through the beginning and give us a run through of why we do this, and then we will give room for the questions. So we said that many people have an idea of what we believe. We can simply answer the question, what we believe. The problem most times is that we don't know why we believe what we believe. Why do we believe that Jesus is God, for example? Why do we believe in Trinity? Why do we believe in rapture, if you believe in rapture? Why do we believe in life after death? We don't know why. In fact, for most young Christians, the answer is, well, my pastor says so, my mommy says so, or they just pick one verse in the Bible, and then that is their why. And so when people come up with certain proofs to try to tell you that, oh, well, the book you just picked this verse from has been adulterated, and how are you sure that that verse you picked is actually what it is? Then you begin to lose your identity and fall flat. And if that is not a bigger problem, people even have another bigger delusion of how did we arrive at what we believe. That's why we do apologetics, and we'll continue to do apologetics to solidify our faith. And we finally looked at 1 Peter 3:15. He said, but sanctify the Lord in your hearts and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you. Yes, Colorado, please, can you ask your question, or perhaps you have something you want to add? Thank you so much. I can see somebody's hand raised up with the name Colorado. Yes, any other person with a question or something to add? Colorado is not saying anything. Yes, Ella, over to you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good evening. I wanted to point out something or ask a question generally.
Okay.
So recently, I was talking to one of my classmates, and we're having all this discussion of Bible is adulterated, Bible is not adulterated, and not. And I've come to realize that sometimes it's not that we don't want to speak about Jesus or explain things, but people are not really willing to understand the concept. So one of the things we're talking, I was trying to bring up the apologetics at some points. We come to realize that most of we Christians, that's like most of them have closed their minds and they want to believe what they believe. It's more of like this woke generation. So how do you approach that kind of person? Because now he's a Christian at home, but now in school he told me that he does not want to be a Christian because he has come to believe that everything is a lie, and he wants to be a Muslim. And everybody in his building is a Muslim, so he goes to the mosque now. He's learning how to pray like that, and you know, it's just unlearning every Bible principle because he feels some stories in the Bible do not add up. Like, where did God see children? If he only created Adam and Eve, how did the world reproduce? And those funny concepts are now difficult per se, and you're now close-minded. How do you deal with people that have chosen what they want to believe and have closed their mind to every form of explanation? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, before I give the answer, anybody wants to give an answer? Anybody wants to help with an answer before I speak? We have some elders in the house. Bro Mike, Bro Paul, Dr. Kenny, Prof. Sonny. All right, so let's go straight to it.
Sorry,
okay, Bro Mike,
I went off while she was asking the question. I didn't really get the question.